In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is risen. You know, the other night I was talking with the Goya, and I realized what I was talking to them about, I have never really spoken about in here. And we were talking about mothers, and we were talking about Mother's Day, and I asked them a couple questions about who they understood to be mothers in the church. And if we look at today's gospel reading, we see that the women who went to the tomb first, or the people, I should say, that went to the tomb first were women. It wasn't the men. And they went back and told the rest of the disciples that Christ has risen. And even the recognition of Christ as being there, standing there, and he says Mary, and she says Rabboni, or teacher. The first recognition of Christ as being risen from the dead comes from the mouth of a woman. And I think many times in the Orthodox Church, we somehow, just because women can't become clergy, although back in the day there were women clergy, back in the early church there was deaconesses, and it's very interesting that today we hear about the institution of the deacons, but there was deaconesses in the early church, but that fell into disuse because of problems or whatever the issues were. But the deaconesses were women who were older and mature and considered to be very pious in their faith, who went and distributed Holy Communion and had women's ministries in the church. So they would go visit women, they would go visit the widows, they would also administer Holy Communion to them and take the sacraments and do exactly what deacons currently do in our church. So it's not that women are, how do I say this, that they're pushed aside in the Orthodox Church at all. And one of the things that I asked the Goya the other day was, who's the first mother in the church? And I asked you that question. Panagia is the first mother? Okay, but where did, from the biblical perspective of the Old Testament, where did everybody come from? Adam and Eve, right? But then I told them that the important thing of the understanding of Adam and Eve is the story, not the logistics. Because I'm going to read something to you from the Bible that everybody has that is going to kind of make you think twice about our understanding of Adam and Eve. So we look back and we say that Adam and Eve were the first two, right? The first two on the earth. That Adam was first and Eve came from his rib. And we understand all of that as being what we understand in our theology of Adam and Eve. But if we look at the story of Adam and Eve as well, and we go back into who were their children? They had Cain and Abel. And Cain kills Abel, the brother, right? So the two brothers get in a fight. Cain kills Abel. Everybody's heard that story, at least, hopefully. And then it goes on to this interesting passage. So Cain kills Abel, and then Cain says to the Lord in Genesis 4:13, and Cain says to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Surely you have driven me out of this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth. And it will happen that anyone who finds me will kill me." Anyone who finds me. So if we got Adam and Eve, Cain kills Abel, who's going to find them? Okay, let me continue. And then the Lord said to him, "Therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him." So now all of a sudden, the markers go up and we say, wait, who's going to find him? Who's going to kill him? And why did the Lord mark him? He scarred him or whatever the issue was. And then it continues on, and it says, "Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod," another town. He leaves Eden, and it says that Nod was east of Eden. So he leaves Eden, the Garden of Eden, and he goes to a town that is established. And then it says, and then Cain knew his wife. He found a wife there. "And she conceived and bore Enoch. And he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch." So now everybody's like, what is going on here? Well, there's a lot written about the book of Genesis and understanding what we understand of the first mother of the church, of Eve. There is no concrete anything, if you want to call it that. There's a lot of scholars who have written about what it means. Was it that we evolved to a certain point? And I know as soon as we say evolution, everybody's ears go up like, oh, no, Father's on, he's crazy. But did we evolve to a certain point, and then there was a break, and then God injected our reasoning and our soul in us, and then we became the people that we are now? And he did that to everyone who was on the face of the earth, and then picked the story of Adam and Eve as being the prototype for disobedience to God? Or was it that Adam and Eve were there, and after Adam, Eve came out of his rib, that God started making other people too, but we just don't hear about it? So there's a lot of things there, and I'm not going to be able to give you the concrete answer, but the reason I bring it up to you is to understand that the story of Adam and Eve, it outweighs any of the logistics of where we came from. And what I want you to remember too is that when I mentioned this during Holy Week and Easter, that Christ is, there's Adam and there's Eve. Christ is the new Adam, and the Virgin Mary is the new Eve. Okay, and one of the things, I don't know if we have the icon back here. Just happen to have a printer in the back, right? So, the icon there of the Anastasia. I was speaking about this with the Goyans too. You notice that, like I said before, everybody knows this who's been here for a while, that the people on the right side are the good people. The people on the left side are the people who don't accept Christ. That's why there's the halos on Christ's right, and St. John is there, and then the people on the left do not have halos. But who, out of Adam and Eve, who's on the right and who's on the left? Adam's on the right and Eve's on the left, because she was the first one to fall away. But with the coming of the Virgin Mary, this is a famous icon. It's called the Deicus icon. It's St. John the Baptist and the Virgin Mary and Christ in the middle. The Virgin Mary, from the inception of the church, is always on Christ's right side. She takes precedence. So it's always the right of, you see Christ is here, the Virgin Mary's on the right, St. John's on the left now, because she is more, has more seniority or more, more significance in the church. Now, in clergy, when we line up from, when the bishop comes, the bishop always stands in the middle. But if there's multiple bishops, the bishop with the most seniority is in the middle, the next one's to the right, the one after that's to his left, and then the one after that is to the right of the first right guy, and it goes back and forth. It zigzags back and forth. It's kind of confusing. And that's why when we do the Vespers, everybody's kind of like looking around like, what year were you ordained? And I'm serious. That is exactly what happens at the Vespers. So you think everybody's saying these special prayers, and they're saying, what are you? What are you? And especially if you go to like a pan-Orthodox service, it's mayhem, because you're trying to figure out where they're standing. And then when they switch around, everybody switches different again. So my point of that is the Virgin Mary in the church, out of any of the icons, out of any of them, whenever you see Christ, the Virgin Mary is to his right as the next important figure that we have in the church. So on this day of Mother's Day, where we celebrate mothers and we think about the church, and we know that the life of the Virgin Mary is unheralded. We don't hear much about it, and I challenge you to find it in the Bible about her life. It's not in the canon of the Bible. It's in apocryphal texts that didn't make it into the Bible, all the information we have about her life. But she is the most important. But Christ's life takes precedence, as we've said. But in understanding mothers, think about her life, that it is that important to the life of the church, that she is the conduit in the back of the church that leads up to Christ in the dome. She takes the people as the conduit to Christ and brings Christ down to the people. That's why she's always in the back of the church. And it's unfortunate that she's sitting enthroned in that icon there, because the more, the more significant icon of the Virgin Mary is with her arms out like this, and she's standing. as the one who brings up and leads up and is kind of like this, pointing to Christ in the dome. But if we look at the church and we say that, men have precedence in the church or whatever, don't do yourself the disservice of the theological misunderstanding to say that men, just because men can become clergy, that the church is all based on men. Because that's not the case at all. Without the Virgin Mary, there's no birth of Christ. And without the Virgin Mary in her life, out of all of history, Christ and God saw her as the perfect person out of the entire history of the world to bring God into the world. That's why she's called the Theotokos, the bearer of God, God's mother, as we say, the mother of God. So on this day when we remember mothers and all of you who celebrate today, the church, as many times we think of mothers going unheralded in what they do, and all the beautiful things that they do, all the tireless efforts, and when they're exhausted and they keep working to do something with their family, and then there's more responsibility, and there's more responsibility, and things keep piling up, we have to remember their importance and also the importance of motherhood in the church. To never overlook that. Never overlook the role of the Virgin Mary and the model that she is, not only for mothers, but also for fathers. Not only for men, but also for women. And I pray that her example and her strength to endure what she went through in her life. There's no mother that went through more in the history of the world than the Virgin Mary. Not to stand by your son as he's being murdered, to have the understanding of him being a God, to raise him knowing some about him but not everything, and to have the suffering that she had in her life. No one's gone through more. So when we look at our lives and we think that mothers are, that all of you mothers today, that you are burdened and weighed down by the responsibilities of your life, look to the Virgin Mary. And all of us should be looking to her for strength, because she is the new Eve. The new garden comes from her. The new birth of salvation came from her. And I pray that her prayers and her strength continue to be with all of you on this day. And a happy Mother's Day to all of you. And may God continue to strengthen each and every one of us as we recognize and embrace her motherhood and all of your motherhoods as well. Christos Anesti.